All right, in this video, we are looking to explore more linear functions. And specifically, we want to find out an equation of a linear function given certain information. This picture, just for your interest, I'm sure you're interested, is on a trail called Sunset Boulevard. And that's in Tabor. Beautiful trail just above the river. Okay, so we're looking at trying to come up with a linear function that looks like that. And in the last section, we looked at how we can take a graph and make the equation, how we can take the slope and y-intercept and come up with the equation. Even if the slope-intercept or the equation is written in this form, we saw how we can convert it to that form. In this video, we're going to look at these last three ways of coming up with an equation if I'm given a slope and a point, or given 2 points, or a point, and whether the line is parallel or perpendicular. So the first question says, write an equation with these characteristics. So I need to come up with y equals something x plus something, given this information. So initially, they gave me the slope. So they already gave me a slope. All I have to do is come up with what the y-intercept for this relationship is. So here's how you can do it. What I do is I just write out the formula. This is what I need to come up with. 2/3 is the slope, so y equals 2/3 x plus b. And now treat this as though it were any other equation where you've got a certain number of unknowns and you want to find one of the unknowns. So I'm trying to find b, but I also don't know y and an x. But if you take a look at this point that you're given, that's an x and a y value. So I can take those and plug them into the equation where they should be. So y is a 7, 2/3, x is a 3, or 3 over 1, plus b. And now I've got a formula or an equation with only one unknown in it, that's b. So I can solve for it. So this here, 2/3 times 3, I think gives me 2, equals 7, subtract 2 from both sides, and I come up with b is 5. So that's my y-intercept. So now I can go back to my original equation. This is what I'm supposed to come up with, and I need to come up with a slope. It's given to me already, 2/3 x, plus the y-intercept I found right here to be 5. So that's the equation of my line. Try that one. See if you can do the same thing with that question. Press pause and then press play. See how you do. So here's my equation. My slope is 2. My x value is a -3. And my y value is a 4. If it helps you to write x and y on top of that, do that. Plus b. 2 times -3 is a -6. And then if I add 6 to both sides, I'll get 10 on this side is equal to b. Now, again, that's not the end because they want to know the equation. So the equation of the line is y is equal to, the slope is 2x plus the y-intercept is 10. Now, just a follow-up question that you could have asked with that question is, well, what if x were 3, what's the y value? In other words, if I'm looking at that line that might look something like that, if x is 3 right there, on the line, what does that correspond in y value? And all you would do is plug that 3 in right there where x is. 2 times 3 plus 10. So 2 times 3 is 6 plus 10 is 16. So that y value corresponding on that line would be a positive 16. Okay, so we've seen how you can take a slope and a point, figure out the equation. Now we've got a question where I'm given 2 points, but I'm not given a slope or a y-intercept, and I have to find those. We saw in the last video how you can take 2 points and find the slope. With this one, I've plotted them already here, so I'm just going to do the count. So to get from this point here to this point here, I need to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going up 4, and I'm going over 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 4 over 4. So my slope for this line is 4 over 4, or just plain 1. Now, if doing it on a graph doesn't work for you, we can always use this formula right over here. So let's have this x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2 is 5 minus y1 is a 1 over x2 is a 2 minus x1 is a negative 2. Make sure you don't mess up on those signs. 5 take 1 is 4. 2 minus a negative, those would cancel. To be positive is 4. We get the same thing. Okay, so either way is fine. So now that I know the slope, then I do the exact same thing as I did in the last question. But this time I have two points to choose from to plug in for x. And either of them will work. Let's try, well, we can try both of them. So here's my equation. I know my slope is 1, so I put that there. And then for x and y, I either put this point in or that point. So let's do the first one, this one here. So x is a negative 2 plus b is equal to 1. Now I need to solve for b. 1 times minus 2 is minus 2. Add 2 to both sides. I come up with a y-intercept of 3. So therefore, my equation is y is equal to, let me just write the whole thing. So y is equal to, my slope is 1, x, plus my y-intercept is 3. That's what I come up with there. Just to prove to you that either point will work, let's try it. So here's my equation. My slope is 1. This time I'm going to use this point. So the x value is 2, plus b I don't know, but the y value is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. Subtract 2 from both sides. 5 take away 2, 3. Same answer as that. So it doesn't matter which point you use. You can use either of them. Okay, just one thing, just before I give you your turn. Another way of asking this exact same question is this over here. So here they're saying, what's the value of the function h when x is a minus 2, the y value comes out to a 1. So if they give you it in this notation, they're giving you an x value and a y value. Okay, you try. Okay, hopefully you've pressed pause, tried it on your own, and now you're pressing play to see if you're right or not. So this gives me a 0.14, and this gives me a point -213. So let's figure out what the slope is. Oh, and the question actually asks, what's the value of the function when you plug in a 2 in for x? That's what they're asking in the end. But first I have to figure out what the function is. So there's my 2 points. Let's figure out slope. So slope is, okay, x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2, here's my formula right over there. Y2 is 13 minus y1 is a 4 over x2 is a -1 minus x1, which is 1. 13 take away 4 is 9 over a -3. So if I divide those, it comes out to a -3 or -3 over 1, whatever. That's my slope. Okay, so now I can take y is equal to mx plus b, plug a -3 in for the slope, and now I'm going to plug in the values for x and y. Again, I can use either point up here. I'm going to use this first one because there's no negatives, just because no negatives can mess me up. So x is a 1, y is a 4. So 4 is equal to -3 plus b. If I add 3 to both sides, on this side I get a 7. So therefore, the equation of my line is y is equal to, what was my slope? Oh, -3x. My y-intercept is a +7. So that's the equation of my line. In the question, though, they actually say, what is h of 2? And I guess I could have written this instead of y there. I could have written h of x is equal to -3x plus 7. So if they say h of 2, in other words, plug an x value of 2 in and see what y comes out to. So let's do that. H of 2 is equal to negative 3x, we're saying is 2 plus 7. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6 plus 7 is a positive 1. So H of 2 is equal to a positive 1. That's another point that's on the line. Now, if you were to graph those, and I'm just going to do them just rough. So 1, 4, about there. Negative 2, 13, probably up here somewhere. And H of 2, that's over here, would be at about 1. And notice that all those points, it's not perfect, but it's close, all those points would fall on the same line. Okay, now let's look at another way of figuring out the equation of line is knowing if your line is parallel or perpendicular to another one. Perpendicular lines are like these ones here, the blue and the red ones, and perpendicular ones are lines that meet at right angles. And there's something cool that happens with their slope. I'm not sure what the slope of both of these are, but if I take this slope, let's call it M1, and I take this slope, call it M2, the product of those two is equal to negative 1. So M1 times M2 is equal to a negative 1. Now, another way of saying that is that both of these lines are reciprocals, negative reciprocals of each other. For example, if slope 1 was, say, 2/3, the perpendicular slope would have to be, you'd have to flip that fraction over, so 3 over 2, and you'd have to change its sign. So up here, this one was positive, this would have to be a negative. Okay, now if you were to take those 2/3 times negative 3 over 2, notice these will cancel, you'd be left with a negative 1. So the product of the two is equal to negative 1, but in practice, you flip it over and change its sign. Those are perpendicular lines. Parallel lines are ones that have the identical slope. So if this was, say, M3 and this was M4, those two slopes must be equal to each other. Or for example, say this slope was negative 2, then this slope also must be the exact same thing. Okay, so let's use that idea in solving some kind of an equation or a question. So here they want us to find the equation of a line, and they're giving us two things. They're giving us a point. The point's 2, 5. That's an x value and a y value. And they say it's parallel to this line. So this isn't really my line, but my line's parallel to that one. If it's parallel, that says something about the slopes. So the slopes in this case are going to be the same. So I just need to figure out what the slope of this line here is. So let's do that. It's 3x minus 2y equals 12. If I rearrange it into the proper form, the old y equals mx plus b form, I can determine what the slope is. So negative 2y is equal to negative 3x plus 12. Just one other thing, in any of these videos, if I'm skipping a step or something, send me a note and say, hey Jeff, there was some magic happening. How did you get this from this? So if you're ever not sure why something happened, let me know and I can explain it. Okay, and now let's divide everything by negative 2. So I'll get y is equal to a positive 3/2 x minus 6. So this other line, this one here, has a slope of 3/2 and a y-intercept of negative 6. That's what the b value is. But I don't care what the b value is because that's not my line. That's a different line. So this is the slope that I'm going to take. Let me just show you graphically what I mean here. So this line here could be a line that looks something like this. Okay, that's the blue line. But my line might be, I don't know, something that looks like this. It's parallel to it, but notice it would have a different y-intercept. So I can't use that information, but I can use this information because my line's parallel to it. So I can go back to my y is equal to mx plus b. I know my slope, because it's parallel to this other one, so the slope is going to be 3/2. And I know a point that's on the line. So the x value is 2, or 2/1, and the y value is 5 plus b. Here the 2's cancel, so this would be a 3 plus b is equal to 5. And then finally subtract 2 from both sides, or subtract 3 from both sides to give you 2. So the y-intercept of my line is 2. Looks like my graph was a little off. It should have been up here somewhere. Anyway, the y-intercept of my line is 2, and now I can write the equation of the line. So y is equal to the slope, 3/2 x plus 2. So that's the equation of the line that's parallel to this line, and it passes through that point. Why don't you try a perpendicular one? Press pause, and then press play. Okay, let's find the slope of this perpendicular line. So minus 5y equals minus 2x plus 10. And divide everything by minus 5. So I'll get minus 2 over minus 5 plus 10 over minus 5. So my perpendicular line is 2 over 5x minus 2. So this is the slope. But that's my line is perpendicular to this one. So the slope of my line has to be the negative reciprocal of that. So I flip it over, 5/2, and I change its sign. So that's the slope of my line. Okay, so now I've got, this is my equation. I know the slope is negative 5/2, and my x value is 5, and my y value is a negative 1. So this would be negative 25/2 plus b is equal to negative 1. Add 25/2 to each side, so negative 1 plus 25/2 is equal to b. So it's 12.5, so this would be 11.5, or 23/2. And you can do that on your calculator. So the equation of my line is y is equal to, my slope is negative 5/2x, and my y-intercept is a positive 23/2. I think that's correct. All right, here's another, or a nice mathematical model of linear functions. So they say a town's population grows linearly, so it's going up at a steady increase, as opposed to exponential increase. In 2004, and let's use that as our ground zero. So we'll instead of using a date, and you'll see that in lots of other examples in your homework, instead of using that actual number for your date, they'll say, well, that's ground zero, or we'll call that 0, year 0. So in year 0, the population, or to start, the population was 6,100. 5 years later, so instead of using 2009, I'm going to use 5. The population grown to 8,100. Assume this trend continues, predict the population, identify in which the population will reach 16,000. So to answer both of these questions, I really need to find a function that defines that growth that they were talking about. They've given me enough information that I should be able to determine my slope, and I should be able to determine the y-intercept. Okay, so let's do that. Let's first find the slope. So slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So the slope, let's call this x1, this will be y1, x2, and y2. So y2 is 8,100 minus x1, or y1, 6,100, over x2, where was it, 5, minus x1, 0. Okay, so the slope is 2,000 over 5, and if you divide that, I think you get 400. So, to write my equation, it's y equals mx plus b. So I know my m. M is 400. But now, since I know one of the points, or a point that's on that line, I can plug that in for my x and my y value and solve for b. And really this one, hopefully you can see already that that one's b, but let's use that one. So for an x value of 0, the y value is 6100 plus b. So anything times 0 is 0. So b comes out to 6100. So to write my equation then, is y is equal to 400x plus 6100. So if they want to know what the population is in 2021, well, how many years since 2004 is that? It looks like that's 17 years. So we can put a 17 in for x. So again, my equation is y is equal to 400x plus 6100. So if you're talking 17 years after they started, 400 times 17 I think is 6800 plus 6100. So altogether that would be 12,900 people. So in the year 2021, you're going to have 12,900 people. So that's for question number 1. For question number 2, what year will the population reach 16,000? So I'll put 16,000 in for y is equal to 400x plus 6100. Now I need to solve for x. So I'll subtract 6100 on each side. So I think that'll give me 15,900 is equal to 400x. Divide both sides by 400. So 15,900 divided by 400. So the zeros cancel. 4 and that, it'll be about 40. 39.75, about like that. So that is how many years since 2004 it'll be. So if you add 2004 plus almost 40, it'll be in about 2044-ish. That's when the population will reach 16,000. I think I did that right. Okay, hopefully that helps you with that. That one. Now the last one, and you can try this one. So a similar kind of question. Car sales, linear pattern. How many cars will be sold in 2030? When will sales hit 500? And so you would do the same thing. So you start with maybe an x1, y1, x2, y2. You'd find the slope. Maybe press pause, try it, come back when you're done. Okay, so to find the slope, I'm going 253 minus 220 over 1 minus 0. So that'll be 33 over 1, or just 33. So that's my slope. So if I have a slope of 33x, now I can plug in an x and a y value. Let's use the first one. So the y value is 220 when the x value is 0. So 33 times 0 is 0. So the y-intercept is just 220. So the equation that defines that pattern that's on here is y is equal to slope 33x plus 220. There we go. how many cars will be sold in 2030. So 2030, I'll have to know what my X value would be for that. So I just subtract 2030 minus 20, that'd be 10. So I would plug in a 10 everywhere I see an X. There's just one spot. So it'd be 330 plus 220. So in 2030, you would have sold 550 cars. Now the last question they ask is, when will sales hit 500? Well, it must be just before this, because this one we got 550, so it's got to be just a little bit before that, 2028 maybe. Let's solve it. Here's our equation. Y equals 33x plus 220. They're saying plug 500 in for y. So 500 here, 33x plus 220. And subtract 220 on each side. So it'll be 280 is equal to 33x. Divide both sides by 33. So 280 divided by 33. Calculator. I guess I should have brought decimals out. Okay. What am I doing? 280 divide 33. 8.5 about. So 2020 plus 8.5, it'd be 2028, and halfway through that year, that's when they'd reach 500 sales. Okay, so we've looked in this video at linear functions, and at the end we've also looked at modeling those and found the key thing with all linear functions to find the slope, find the y-intercept, and use those to help you extrapolate or figure out some other numbers that might be in the future.